All right. Okay. So let's get started here, shall we? I'm going to move this camera around just a little bit and have a little bit better um, view. All right. This is great. Okay. So welcome to another podcast. All right. So this is James Keddington, and I'm here with the Overcome and Become podcast. Today's episode, there is no guest, it's just me, and I'm going to be talking about primary food and secondary food. And so it's a topic that I love a lot, and it's something that's been very beneficial to me as I've understood the complete integration of all the areas of health in my life. Okay. So let's talk about what is primary food and what is secondary food. Okay. But we're going to start backwards. And actually, let's talk about what is food first, right? Food is something that we take in that nourishes us, that gives us nourishment, right? That helps us be functional, right? And then aids in our ability to overcome life, however it comes at us, and become what we're trying to become. All right, so now that we identify what food is, what is primary food, what is secondary food? And we're going to start backwards. Secondary food is the food we think of when we think of the word food, right? Hamburgers, hot dogs, kale smoothie, muffins, breakfast, lunch, dinner, right? It's all the things that we eat through our mouth that we either enjoy or maybe even don't enjoy sometimes, right? But that is secondary food. So if that's secondary food, what then is primary food? Well, primary food is the other things that we take in that nourishes our other aspects of our health, like our mental health, or our spiritual health, our emotional health, or health, relationships, things like that. So that is our primary food. So why is primary food? Why are those categories primary? And the things that we're consuming and digesting, why is that secondary food? Well, here is why I consider them primary and secondary. Primary food, those categories, because they are impacting so many categories, so many other things. They are primary to not just our physical well-being, but our emotional, social, and emotional well-being. And the food that we digest, it's secondary because while it impacts all those other things as well, it's only half the story, right? So, and it's by itself, it's half the story. So anyways, that is why it doesn't even matter what is primary, secondary, because they are all essential to our well-being. Just like in secondary food, if you take in Doritos and you eat McDonald's or fast food or poor quality food all the time, your body will start to function poorly. Same thing with primary food. If you are taking in poor quality things that we'll talk about later, we'll go into those. If the quality is poor, the outcomes will be poor as well. All right. So let's talk about the categories in primary food. And there's roughly 12 categories that we're going to talk, and there may be others that that you identify, but for the most part, there's 12 categories of primary food that we're going to discuss today. And we're going to briefly just cover these at a very high level today. The idea for today's podcast is really just to give you an introduction to each of these categories so you can begin to think about how these categories of primary food impact you on a daily basis. And ideally, what's happening is as you consider these different things, you also you're listening to your body and your mind and your soul about what stands out to you? Oh, I need to do that better, or I need more of this, or I'm good there. I'm good. I'm doing well in that area, and you can redirect your focus to other areas, right? And so this kind of sets the stage for you thinking, what could I do better? What could I do more of? What could I have less of, right? And so in future podcast episodes, we'll be taking deep dives into each of these 12 categories of primary food. So that way you can explore high quality ways of nourishing your body in each of these categories. All right, so let's just start off by introducing what are the 12 categories of primary food. We're going to start with creativity. There's creativity, there's finances, career, your education, your physical health, there's physical activity, home cooking, your home environment, relationships, joy, and spirituality. All right, so let's do a high level on each of these, and then I'm going to issue you a challenge at the end of this, and we'll close up from there. So this will be a little bit shorter episode than we've had recently, but it's a great one. Right. All right. So creativity. What is creativity? Creativity is not the same as artistic. I used to think that creativity was artistic expression, and it certainly can be that, but it isn't always that, right? Creativity is looking at the world through a new lens, identifying different ways of doing things. Sometimes at work, we call it problem solving, right? Or looking outside of the box, right? So creativity can be, I'm going to do something different this weekend than I always do. I'm going to maybe put some time and effort into planning a date night with my spouse or partner or a loved one or a child, right? Or maybe it's, I'm going to look at different ways of managing a relationship, right? So there can be lots of creative ways. It could be, I'm going to build something. I'm going to build a shed in my backyard, or I'm going to learn a DIY project. And it could be artistic. It could be, I'm going to learn to paint or go to a paint night type thing, right? But releasing our creativity allows us to explore new ways of thinking. And this benefits, all of these ways are going to do a lot of things for our brain health, our spiritual health, mental, social. One of the ways that creativity impacts our other health is with our brain health, right? In that it forces us to think differently, especially those of us who are more analytically minded. Being Exercising creativity utilizes different aspects of our brain, expanding our neural pathways and offering neuroplasticity. And so it really strengthens our cognitive functions as well, even though we may be doing some things that are fun, but it can also be very challenging too, right? And so that's one way that creativity benefits our health. All right, let's talk about finances now. Finances, so many of us look at finances and we consider our wealth or our income as our personal value. And that's not always the case. In fact, it's rarely the case that our finances and our wealth determines our personal value. In fact, it is not what determines our personal value. But we live in a world where we have to pay bills. We have a mortgage or a rent to pay. We've got to put gas in the car. We've got to buy food to eat. We've got to survive, right? This world revolves around money. And when money is tight, or money is, we're in debt, or if we're making a lot of money, but it's not being leveraged to uh, make compound interest and we're not sure how to manage it well, it's stressful. And that stress can lead to inflammation. It can lead to worry. It can lead to restlessness. It can lead to anxiety. And we don't want to do that. We want to be in control of those things so that way we can do the things we like the way we like to do them. And so finances, while it is a great source of freedom when we have it, even if we do have it, it can be a great source of stress. And if we don't have a lot of it, if we're living month to month, it can be a great source of anxiety too. The good news is It doesn't matter if you're wealthy or not. Being in control of your finances is a great way to reduce stress and become calm and reduce anxiety. So ask yourself, what is it that I could be doing better with my finances? Maybe you need a financial planner, or maybe you need to learn to budget better, or maybe you need to learn how to invest your money across many different avenues, right? And so, or look for different streams of income, okay? But finances is all about you being in control versus them controlling you. All right, let's talk about career now. Career is so important, right? I remember being in the fourth to fifth grade. What do you want to be when you grow up? And you know what did not cross my mind? I want to start a podcast, right? That was not on my mind at all. Um, and a health coach was not on my mind. I wanted to be a business guy or a baseball player. That's what I wanted, right? But regardless of that, I wanted to be happy. I wanted to do things that made me happy. And how many of us go to a job or a career where we're stressed out, or there's toxic environment, or we're afraid to speak up, or we don't feel like we have a voice, or we're not making a contribution? Well, with your career, it's important to identify what's most important to you. For some people, it's, you know what, I don't care what I do because I don't value my happiness at work. I value my happiness at home. And you're able to not bring work home with you, and you can go and do your work. You can go whatever it is, whether it be an office job or working out in a construction site. You can go, you can do it, you can come home, and you can be happy still. And that's great. Some people are like that. Some people are like, no, I can't separate the emotions, and I bring those toxic relationships home, and then I pass them on to my kids or my spouse or my partner or whatnot, right? So choosing a career is really important. So one, identify, are you happy? Are you making contributions that are important to you? And maybe you don't care what the contribution is, and maybe the contribution needs to be altruistic, and it wants to be more than making money. It wants to be have an impact on our environment or our culture or your local community, right? So you need to ask yourself, what is it that you want out of a career, and are you getting that? And if you're not, what are the things that you can do to facilitate a happier career or work or job choice? All right, we're going to talk about education now. Education does not need to be formal. It does not need to be going to school. It does not need to be enrolling into a class. It is simply learning new things. And learning new things is one of the super behaviors that I talk about. When we learn something new, it impacts every aspect of our health, whether it be our brain health, our physical, our social, emotional, spiritual, right? Everything is impacted by learning something new. And so it could be as simple as being curious and meeting someone at the dog park and saying, how did you train your dog? And now you're learning something. That's an education. You can subscribe to an online learning platform like masterclass.com. I love Masterclass, right? There's a lot of free online courses you can take through edX, right? Or MITx, or a lot of universities have free classes that you can take. You don't get credit for them, but you can still learn, right? I took a class a couple of years ago on urban planning, believe it or not. I was just curious, like, what does urban planning look like, right? And what are the social impacts of that? And I've taken a lot of classes on masterclass.com, like creative writing and writing for social justice, right? Like, I'm not a social justice person, but I'm curious, what does writing for that look like, right? And so all these things, all this education is important for us. And when we're receiving education, we are adding knowledge and we're adding brain capacity. But when you learn something new, it's fun, especially when you enjoy the topic, right? It could be, it doesn't have to be a book or just knowledge in your brain. It could be how to do a woodworking project, how to, whatever it is, right? How to plant a garden. So it can be a lot of how-to things as well. But the point is, when you're furthering your education, you're expanding your breadth of knowledge, you're expanding your influence, and you're expanding your interest in the things that bring you joy, which is also one of those things that we'll talk about later. All right, so education is important. Health, right? Health is determined by so many things, right? The stress that we bring into ourselves, whether it be from work or relationships, it could be our body's natural tendencies to reject good things or absorb bad things or hold on to bad things. It could be our resistance to illness. For me, like one of my ongoing health issues is my ears, right? I've always got to pay attention to my ears. I was born with a cleft lip and a cleft palate, and there's some side effects from the repairs on that. I've always got ongoing problems with my ears. So I know when the weather changes, I've got to take care of that. When my ears are not doing well, I start to get grumpy and not feel good, and I'm kind of short tempered. And so I have to pay attention to my health in that area. And for all of us, it's going to be different, right? And certainly the food we digest and take in contribute to that. But the other things that contribute to our health, like I mentioned before, can be stress and things that we'll talk about later, like physical activity, right? And so when when our physical body is not healthy, everything else isn't working great either, right? And now we're not always going to be optimally healthy, but we can be our best, right? And sometimes we do get sick, right? We get the flu or we get COVID or we get a cold, right? And we need to take time to rest and pay attention to that, right? So how are we doing on our health? And if you have ongoing chronic illness, it's important to address those things. Most chronic illness can be dealt with inflammation, and inflammation comes from stress and foods that we eat. So I think you kind of got my emphasis on stress, inflammation, digestible foods when it comes to our health, but also pay attention to the things that are out of your control where you may need medical help or alternative medicine help as well. All right, let's move on to the next one. Physical activity. So important. This is another one of the super behaviors, right? When our body is moving, we are less likely to be lonely, less likely to be sad, more likely to be in control of our emotions, more likely to be having relationships with other people, more likely to be putting down technology, more likely to be resisting illness, more capable of dealing with anxiety and sadness. And then also when our body's moving, we are putting to work the things inside of our body that help build immunity, that help release the hormones that help us be and stay happy, that help with digestion and absorption of nutrients. And so physical activity is so important. So even if it's just walking every day, you don't need to be weightlifting. Now, certainly I endorse weightlifting and resistance training because that builds our muscles, and that for longevity and bone density, that's so, so important. But even just walking every day can be critical for us. All right. Next one, home cooking. Wow, this shows up on the list. Home cooking. Why is home cooking on the list of a primary food? Well, there's a number of reasons why. One, home cooking taps into creativity. So it's kind of like a two for one, right? So we can learn new recipes to create. So we're building confidence. We start to enjoy our food more, right? Home cooking also means that when you're cooking your food at home, on the secondary food level, it's better for you. There's less calories, there's less crap going into it, right? And there's more nutrients typically, right? So when you're using fresh vegetables and you're doing more stuff, you're taking in these things that allow you to get more bang for your buck on the calories that you take in. So you're eating less calories and you're going to have more energy, right? So not only is your physical body benefiting from home cooking, but your creativity is benefiting. Also, when you're doing home cooking, if you can surround yourself with other people, your family members, those you live with, roommates, right? So I know that my son before he got married, his roommates, they'd all take a night cooking, right? And so that was a time for them to gather together, check in with each other, became a great social time. And that taps into another one of the primary foods of relationships, but our social health benefits from that too. So cook and eat with other people, right? That'll be great for your relationships. All right, let's move on to the next one, home environment. This one is so important. I remember as a kid just hating when my mom would tell me to clean my room. And you know what? Sometimes I still hate to clean my room, right? But I have learned that when I enter in my house through my garage or the front door, I don't like the feelings of being overwhelmed or frustrated or anxious. I like my home to be a place where I can feel at peace and calm and where I know things are at. And if your home is organized, now the way we organize our homes, it's going to be different for all of us. There's no right way to do it. The only right way is the way that works for you and the people that you live with, right? And so if your home is constantly frustrating to you, those emotions and feelings are going to carry into other aspects of your life. Additionally, if you're always looking for stuff, right, that means your brain is making a lot of decisions and being put to work. Steve Jobs would only wear black. I don't know if you remember this, but he wore a black turtleneck and jeans. And the reason he would do that is because the less decisions he made in a day, the better decisions he was making for the really important stuff. And same thing goes in our home. If we're constantly deciding where's this or we're doing this and we're exercising all this bandwidth in our brain on things that we don't need to do, that if we controlled our home environment, we would be making better decisions in other areas, like what foods to eat or how to respond to adverse situations or great or important decisions at work or listening to people and having the bandwidth to really be present with other people and listening to them, right? So home environment is very important in setting the stage for how we feel, being able to decompress at home and really keep your home as a sacred place where you can rest, relax, find peace versus experience anxiety and stress and worry, right? So that's what we want our home to be. All right, let's move on to relationships. So important. We all have relationships. And as we expand our relationships or deepen those relationships, we become more satisfied with ourselves. And here's what I mean by this: good, deep relationships. Well, let me rephrase this. We are very hard on ourselves. We are harder on ourselves, and the voices in our head are very hard on us. But when we have deep relationships, we can hear how other people see us. And if people see the great stuff in us, like, man, Sally is amazing. She is so good at this. I want to be around Sally. And as we deepen those relationships, we're more likely to tell Sally what she thinks, or what we think of her. And she'll be like, really? You think of me like that? And so we can counter those voices. But if we don't have deep relationships, we're not going to see who we really are. People won't be able to express to us how they see us deeply and in a meaningful way. So relationships are not just important for our emotional health, but they're also important for like our mental health, right? And so, and then expanding our relationships as we start to hang out with people who may think differently than us or who come from different life experiences. We see the world differently, and our compassion begins to grow. Our awareness begins to grow. Our ability to problem solve and be creative and approach problems in a new way begins to grow because now we're learning from others. So as we expand and deepen our relationships, we expand our view of ourselves in a more positive light. We expand our ability to think more creatively. We expand our ability to understand and have compassion and those softer skills. All right. Closely tied to relationships is our social life, right? If we're not doing anything to nurture those relationships by getting out and being with people, then those relationships will dwindle. So we need to have a social life as well. Now, some people will define social life as I'm going to be online in an online gaming community, and that's fine, right? If that's what nurtures you, if that's what brings you happiness, then do it. Some people need that physical touch and that physical connection, like maybe being out in the park and throwing the football around with each other, or going to the gym and being with each other that way, or going to a restaurant and just having that one-to-one deep connection. So some people really enjoy small groups or one-to-one. Some people are energized by being in a big environment, like going to the club and feeling all that energy, right? So pay attention to what type of social life energizes you, right? Now, it doesn't matter if you're um, like outgoing or if you like to be closed. Both are fine, right? I know a lot of people who just like small groups, but they do a lot of public speaking. That's their career, that's their job. And sometimes that public speaking is important. I do a lot of public speaking, but I always take a few people with me, or even just one person. Sometimes it's my wife. I'm like, Kat, I need you to come with me. Or if my son Isaac or Jacob or Hallie, any one of my kids, those people, that one-on-one time really energizes me. So when I go out onto that stage or I jump onto a podcast like here, I've got the energy I need to be a little bit more outgoing than I might normally be, right? So understand what types of relationships, what quantities of that social life energizes you. All right, let's talk about joy. Joy is number 11 on the list of 12. So joy, right? Joy, what does joy come from? So joy is not fleeting. And having joy does not mean that we don't get sad. It doesn't mean that we don't have moments or periods of loneliness or that life isn't hard. Joy is that feeling that rises to the top. And even on the hard days, you can still be happy and content and peaceful with your life. So joy comes from paying attention to doing those things in life that matter most to you. And for some people, it's pursuing ambitious goals. For other people, it's living your core values, doing things in a way that is in harmony with the things that you value, like being kind, right? So, and other people, it's finding joy is finding solitude, right? And being able to have that time each week to reflect on what you did, how you did it, and how you can maybe do it better or do it differently, right? And so some joy comes from meaningful relationships, like we just talked about. So consider what brings you joy, what allows you to be happy and peaceful, even when life is hard and crappy, right? Those are the things that we need to focus on. Those are the things that will be with us throughout our entire lives, right? And so by focusing on those things, it helps us rise above the hard stuff so we can continue to focus on becoming the best stuff. Best stuff. All right, let's talk about the last one, spirituality, right? Spirituality, this is like our spiritual health in many ways, but it is also more than that. So, spirituality, some people think of spirituality as our religion, and religion can contribute to our spirituality, but spirituality is so much more than that. And it's very closely tied to joy. So, spirituality is what grounds us to our core, right? What is that thing that resets us and says, I am the person I need to be in all situations, right? So I'm often reflecting on my spirituality. And one way that I do that is I try to look at other people the way I want to be seen. And when I can connect to myself in that way, I can help other people. So I use like in the airplanes when you get on an airplane and like, okay, if there's an emergency, put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then help other people. Well, same thing with our spirituality. We can't be a light in other people's lives if we don't have a light within our own life. And that's our spirituality. What's that light that glows within you, that brings you that joy that we talked about, but also enables you to be in harmony with everything that you do and everything that you are becoming. So it can be, am I performing acts of service for other people? Am I taking deep breaths? And am I reflecting on decisions? Am I grounding myself to nature, right? So all these things around spirituality is all about, we talk about our body and our soul, right? So spirituality is about those things that feed our soul, the things that intuitively makes us at peace and at one with ourselves. I know Gandhi, we think of Gandhi as a great spiritual person. And once when Gandhi was presenting to the House of Commons, he spoke for like, I forget the time. I'm not going to butcher it, but it was hours, right? And at the end of that speech, like first when he started, there was a lot of resistance, but it ended with like thunderous applause, people standing on the desk and stomping with their feet and clapping with their hands. And at the end, a reporter asked his assistant, said, "How does Gandhi do that? He didn't go off on a script." And the reporter said, "Well, you see, Gandhi is different. What Gandhi feels is what Gandhi thinks. And what Gandhi thinks is what Gandhi says. And what Gandhi says is what Gandhi does." And that's spirituality, right? Are all of those things in alignment? And so those are the 12 categories of primary food. Let's recap those: creativity, finances, career, education, health, physical activity, home cooking, home environment, relationships, social life, joy, and spirituality. All right, so I'm going to ask you a few questions, right? Let's we review those. Now, as you kind of consider those things, what does success look like for you in those areas? What does successful home cooking look like? What does successful physical exercise look like? What does successful home environment look like? So, in each of those areas, what does success look like? And then ask yourself, maybe like on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? Are you a 1 on your scale of success? Are you a 10? Are you a 5? Right? And how do you feel about your life in those different categories? Now, our goal is to kind of bring balance to all of those. Just like we want to have a good balanced diet with good carbs and proteins and fats on a macro level, we want good balance in the primary category as well. So if you've got extreme 10s in one area and extreme 1s in another area, I'm not saying that don't stay at a 10. I mean, ideally, the balance is everything's at a 10, right? But it may be okay to ignore a 10 because you got a 1 that you need to bring up, right? So if you're like, I had a good friend say this, like saying, "Hey, like life balance is a myth." And to some degree it is, right? Because you're constantly working to make balance, but in that effort to create a balanced life, you're imbalanced in your efforts, right? And he would say, look, if you're like $500,000 in debt and you're running 10 miles a day, maybe you need to run 10 miles once a week and put more time into spending less and balancing your budget or finding a better job, right? And so on the inverse is if you're making $1 million a year, but you're 400 pounds overweight, well, maybe take a break from work, take some of that money you've earned, step aside from your career for 6 months and focus on losing that weight, right? So what areas do you need help? Other questions is like, how can you make space for these changes, right? You just can't like take on new stuff. What are some things you need to give up to make those changes? Who can you benefit from? Who is doing well in the areas that you want to do better and that you can get advice from, right? What is a balanced life going to look like in that area, right? So what is a balanced circle going to look like to you, right? So ask those questions. So now is my challenge. I just want you to pick one and do better in it. That's all. All right. So that's it for the podcast today. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share it with other people. I would really appreciate that if you share this with other people. So anyways, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for listening. If you're on YouTube, thanks for watching. And good luck in nourishing yourself, not just with your secondary food, but also with your primary food.